Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome back to my channel. I just want to say thank you to all the new subscribers and everyone who showed their support in the comment section. You guys are freaking awesome. So thank you so much for the feedback and the support you've shown on my recent videos. Also, thank you guys so much for being patient on new videos. I know I've taken a while, but I'm trying to balance out a system between working full-time, just everyday life, and YouTube full-time. But I promise, I've got some new videos coming up, so stay tuned. So today, we're going to be discussing the disappearance of Edward, aka Dylan, and Austin Bryant. This is our second video for the Fostered series, and it is a freaking frustrating one, to say the least. Before we get started, do me a favor and subscribe. It's free, it only takes a second, and it really helps me continue to do these videos. Also, be sure to click the notification bell to keep up with all of my future uploads. Alright, let's get back to it. First, I want to explain that Edward's real name was Dylan. However, it was later changed, which we'll get to. If you decide to research this, Edward is his last known name. However, he preferred to be called Dylan, which is how I'm going to refer to him in this video. Anyway, Dylan and Austin were born to Mary Hyder. Mary also had a third son named David. Dylan was the oldest, and he was born on May 11th, 1992. Mary describes him as being a handful. She says that he was a very typical boy, and he always wanted to be outside exploring. They lived on the grounds of a ranch and a dog kennel, and he enjoyed petting the horses and dogs. He also liked to catch frogs and lizards, and the only time he'd like to stay in the house is when he was watching Barney or Indiana Jones. Fan fave. She also stated that he had a hard time following directions, and he was eventually diagnosed with ADHD. Because of this, he was put on Ritalin to treat his symptoms. Austin was born on January 29th, 1996. Mary described him and David as the perfect children. They both were very quiet and very good babies. She said they were completely inseparable. They slept together all night in their baby bed, and during the day, Austin would crawl into David's playpen and they would play for hours. Mary absolutely loved her boys. However, at the time, she was struggling with past abuse that she had suffered through. She sought treatment and was diagnosed with depression, bipolar disorder, as well as PTSD. Because of that, she was put on medication to treat her symptoms, and it really just took its toll. She would often sleep through most of the day. And despite wishing that she could care for her children, she was really just having a hard time. There were suspicions that the boys weren't being cared for as they should be. But the school finally drew the line when Dylan came to school with a dog bite on his leg. The bite was pretty significant, and it didn't appear that Mary was treating the wound. They believed that the boys were playing with the dogs at the kennel unsupervised, and contacted social services. Mary claimed that it was a mosquito bite, and she said that he scratched it until it became infected. But nonetheless, the caseworker decided that it would be best to remove all three boys from her care. Their first and only foster home was in Monument, Colorado. They were placed with a couple named Edward and Linda Bryant. From the outside looking in, Mary believed that they were going to be great foster parents to her boys. Their lives seemed to really revolve around their kids. The Bryants only had one biological daughter, who by that time was grown, but they would go on to adopt 9 children from foster care. The Bryants would allow Mary to pick up the boys every Wednesday, and she would treat them to McDonald's for dinner. On weekends, they'd actually let her take the boys home with her, and Mary believed they were thriving in the Bryants' care. She really loved the idea of them having both a mother and a father, and they were willing to take all 3 boys and keep them together. She really thought that they were nice people, so when they asked if they could adopt the boys, she agreed. I think she had grown up in an unstable environment herself, and the boys all 3 had different fathers. She knew that she wasn't able to provide a stable home for them, so I think she was doing what she thought would be best for their well-being, which is what any great mother would do. They began the adoption process, and shortly after, Mary began noticing some things that made her uneasy. The Bryants actually started calling Dylan by the name Edward. They wanted to change his name so that he would be named after his adoptive dad. Dylan did not appreciate this in any way, shape, or form. They legally changed his name, but when someone would refer to him as Edward, he would just go off. He'd scream that that was not his name. Once he even said to Mary, "That's not my name, which really shocked her. He had never spoken like that before, and she had never heard him say a cuss word prior to that day. Every time she would see them, the children would ask her when they can go home with her. It absolutely broke her heart to tell them they couldn't. She had to tell them they didn't have a choice but to live with the Bryants. Because the boys were so upset by this, especially Dylan, she would call and speak with them almost every night. Dylan looked forward to this and would often wait by the phone. Unfortunately, the last time Mary would speak to her children was on Christmas Day in 1999. She asked Dylan if he had received any gifts from Santa. And he said yes, but he didn't really seem excited or tell her what he got. After that day, anytime Mary would call to speak to the boys, only Linda and Edward would answer the phone. When she would ask to speak to Dylan, they always had an excuse why she couldn't. They'd say he's at a friend's house or he's playing at the park. It got to a point where the Bryants changed their phone number despite living in the same location. Mary persisted though, and she was able to find their new phone number. When she called and asked to speak to Dylan again, Linda told her she better stop calling. She claimed that it was disruptive to the boys, but Mary would later find out that it's because they had bigger secrets to hide. After that, Mary just gave up trying to contact her boys. She really wanted what was best for them. I think that she did believe they were being cared for, but they were all trying to move forward and heal. The adoption paperwork went through, and they formally adopted the boys in 2000. Now, normally, when you adopt a child from foster care, any monetary benefits cease. You no longer get any money from the state or any support. However, that wasn't the case for the Bryants. Because the boys were considered special needs, they continued to receive money from the state every month. $891.97 per boy, to be exact. But because the adoption was finalized, social workers were no longer allowed to check on the children unless they received an allegation of abuse or neglect. It's just strange to me that they were able to benefit from the boys financially, but no one was able to check on their well-being. That's just asking for trouble, in my opinion. All the Bryants had to do in order to collect their monthly stipends was to complete a roster of how many children they had in their care monthly and file a document annually just showing that each child was receiving an education. The Bryants took full advantage of this. And like I said earlier, they adopted a total of 9 children. I'm no mathematician, but that seems like a lot of money. Their biological daughter, Tammy Falgout, also became a foster mom. And thankfully she did. Her foster children were the ones who came forward with information about Dylan and Austin, and not until they were adults. In January of 2011, the 2 men came forward and spoke to Colorado Spring detectives. They let them know that they had been the foster children of Tammy, and they had been placed in her home in 2003. Neither of them knew what happened to Dylan. They never met him, and both suspected that he was no longer alive. They both said they were very suspicious as to what happened to Austin. They claimed no one had seen them alive since 2003. So for 8 years, no one had seen or heard from Dylan or Austin, and it went completely unreported. Police immediately went and spoke with the Bryants. By this point, they had sold both of their homes in Colorado and moved to Texas in 2005. They told very different stories about what happened to Dylan and Austin. Linda claimed that both boys ran away together, and that happened in May of 2003. She claimed that they went to live with their biological family. Edward claimed that Dylan ran away from his home in 2001. He would have been only 9 years old, and they didn't report him missing. I have a daughter in this age range, and if she would have gone missing within 5 minutes, I would have lost my shit and been calling the police. But that's just me. He claimed that Austin ran away in 2003. At the time, he would have been 7 years old. And again, they didn't bother to report him missing. Because the Bryants clearly weren't telling the truth, investigators basically went on a wild goose chase to find out what happened. They began looking for a paper trail. They just wanted to determine when the boys went missing. Here's the best part. Because Linda claimed the boys went to live with the biological family, police actually swarmed the hider's home looking for them. And I believe that's when the biological family discovered they were missing. When the police began digging into the paperwork, they discovered that the Bryants had filed for bankruptcy in 2007. On the bankruptcy documents, they claimed that they had 8 children living with them at that time. The ages of 2 of them matched that of Dylan and Austin. They also reported that they were receiving a whopping $5,486.11 a month in adoption subsidies alone. They determined that Austin had been in the Bryants' home 2 years before he vanished. In 2001, there was a kindergarten application at the Monument Academy, and there was evidence that he had attended 1st and 2nd grade there as well. Linda told authorities that she enrolled him in public school in August of 2003, but then withdrew him in October to homeschool him. Investigators traveled to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, to interview another man that had been adopted by the Bryants. This man moved into the Bryants' home in 2001 and never met Dylan. He also claimed that he last saw Austin alive in 2003. Going back to the 2 men that came forward, they claimed that he would have black eyes and welts all over his body. The Bryants would lock him in a trunk in the garage and often denied him food. Linda would roll him in blankets like a burrito, so tightly that Austin was unable to move. They also claimed that Austin told them he got shot with a stun gun on several occasions. The other man seemed to confirm this as well. He confirmed Austin had been locked in a trunk and he would get so hungry that he was forced to eat out of the garbage. And he said that Linda went through great lengths to cover her tracks. She actually told him to find a friend that could pose as Austin. They had an upcoming visit with DHS. He said that they never followed through with it though, because the visit was canceled. She would go onto the internet, find photos of boys the same age as Dylan and Austin, and printed them and framed them, and had them in her home. And she kept them updated. What is absolutely crazy to me is that she would go through those lengths, but she and Edward didn't bother to make sure their stories would match, or to even pay attention to when the paper trail would end. Nothing that they said made any sense, and nothing matched up to the evidence that the police had. And when you start off lying to the police and not having matching stories, that's kinda seems suspect. Investigators told Mary that they discovered Dylan and Austin had been beaten, and that Austin would be locked in a trunk for hours while he tried to claw his way out. He would kick the lid and scream for help. The Bryants kept the trunk in a bedroom, but later moved it to the garage and then to a closet because his screams were so loud. They said they knew he would be handcuffed to the chair and forced to march up and down the stairs repeatedly. No one has seen or heard from Dylan since 2001, and Austin since 2003, and no one has been held accountable for their disappearances either. I think that's what makes this case even more heartbreaking. They essentially got away with it. They used these boys for money, all while abusing and ultimately probably murdering them. And absolutely no charges have been brought against them. Linda, however, did admit to falsifying records to continue receiving the subsidy checks. She went as far as to fabricate a record for Dylan for a school that did not exist, you guys. Linda and Edward were both arrested in February of 2011 and were sentenced to prison on fraud charges and are both currently serving sentences. Apparently, in their arrest affidavit, the case is classified as an oncoming homicide investigation. However, investigators told Mary they will not be able to charge anyone in connection to the death of Dylan and Austin until their bodies are found. When they were arrested, there were 5 children still living in their home. Obviously, they've been removed. Another was over 18 and had joined the military, and another was in prison. Unfortunately, Mary just doesn't believe that her sons are alive. She has a theory that the Bryants could have sold the boys on the black market into sex trafficking or something to that effect. I believe that could be a likely theory as well. They base their life around adopting these children for the benefits. In fact, they collected nearly $175,000 in subsidies for the care of Dylan and Austin during the time that the boys are believed to be dead. They were worth more alive than they were dead. And I believe that the only way the Bryants would be willing to risk not only the benefits from the state, but their freedom, was if a big paycheck was involved. Mary said that she'd like to spend 5 minutes alone with Linda. She wants to know what she did to her kids. She said she wants to look Linda in the eye and ask her where her kids are. I can't imagine how hard this has to be. Mary trusted the Bryants, and she ultimately made the decision to allow them to be adopted. The amount of guilt that she probably has to feel, I just can't. Her only hope is that she can find her boys and lay them to rest. She wants to bury them near her grandmother's grave in Oklahoma. I'm going to insert age progression photos of Dylan and Austin. They have not been found yet, you guys. Their bodies have never been discovered, and though it's only a small chance, they could be out there somewhere. They were old enough to remember things when they disappeared, but is it possible that they repressed a lot and don't really remember who they are? Is it possible that they somehow made it out alive and don't want to come forward? I think crazier things have happened, and until there's an update, I think we all should keep looking. Dylan, renamed Edward Bryant, would now be 27 years old, with brown hair and brown eyes. His birth name is Dylan Levi Bennett. He has been diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactive disorder and was taking Ritalin to control it when he went missing. Austin would now be 23 years old. He's white with blonde hair and blue eyes, and his birth name is Austin Gene Bennett. And Austin is spelled A-U-S-T-E-N. He wears glasses with thick lenses. If you have any information that could help solve this case, please contact the El Paso County Sheriff's Department at 719-520-7100. Thanks for watching, you guys. Remember the name Kasey Shane. I'm out.